Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the conversation that we can have here. I think there is fundamental disagreement on what the real solutions need to be. Although I think there's agreement that the current customer service at the IRS is significantly underperforming. Now, in 2019, in a bipartisan fashion, we passed the Taxpayer First Act. In fact, the highly respected colleague, the late Representative John Lewis, led the way on that as well. This was about customer service and reform at the IRS. Were there benefits from that? COVID got in the way. I think that does actually beg the question of what have been the impacts of COVID on customer service at the IRS. Mr. Speaker, I'm concerned that when there are resources afforded the IRS, they're just not used the way they can and should be, especially as it relates to customer service and the honest taxpayers that my colleague from Massachusetts references. That we want to do everything we can for when the American people are doing the right thing for the right reasons and abiding by the law, and yet they would still be exposed to having to prove themselves again after they already did with voluntary tax compliance. But here comes an audit, and I vividly recall the fact that in the 90s, IRS as an agency overstepped. In fact, I believe it was President Clinton that even pulled back the IRS somewhat because they were going after law-abiding, tax-paying Americans who already did everything they were supposed to do. So that certainly establishes my concern about why we would take legislation, why we would see legislation passed last year that would pretty randomly put forward funding that I think will ultimately get in the way of these tax-paying Americans who, like I said, already did everything they were supposed to do, but yet they have to incur the expense. I urge the passage of this bill for good public policy. Thank you. I yield back.